courage is a choice. Make it. The desire to have something that is so deep within you, you can already feel it, even though you don't yet have it. That to me is hope. I'm Michele Rosenthal, the author of Heal Your PTSD, Dynamic Strategies That Work, and I always share hope.
Welcome to I Share Hope, the podcast where world leaders share their real stories of hope and how you can use actionable hope to start changing your life today. And now, here's your host, Chris Williams.
Hey, Chris.
Hey, what's up?
How are you?
Good. How are you doing?
I'm good. How are you doing?
Awesome. Thanks for your time today.
A good holiday yesterday?
Oh yeah, we did. It was just great to not do anything. I building a set of built-in bookshelves in our den, so it wasn't a do nothing day, but it's definitely more fun than working some days.
I know exactly what you mean. Home improvement projects can be so much fun.
Yeah, they really, really can. I like them. Hey, you got video on your side? Are you audio only, or do you have video?
Interior of our house.
You say what?
It was a big job, but I'll tell you, when you get those things done, it feels so good.
I know, and each one you do is just a step in the right direction.
That's so true.
Do you have video on your side?
Do another one. Go ahead.
You have video on your side, or do you have audio only today?
I have audio only today because I think I wrote in my note to you. We're not recording video, right?
I probably just forgot what the note said, so that's okay. I do video on all that we can.
Because my video is, I don't know, it's very fuzzy. I'm not sure what's wrong with it, and I haven't been able to figure it out. But in my note, when I made the appointment, I did make a note of that, and I thought, since I didn't hear back from you about it, that it was not going to be a problem.
No worries at all. It'll be fine. Don't worry about it. So what would you say about your house? Have you done a lot of projects, or you're about to get another house? You said, I missed something.
No.
Okay.
No, I'm not about to get another house. No, we just painted the entire interior of our house.
Whoa.
And we thought, we'll take off a week. We started Memorial Day weekend.
Okay.
And we thought, we'll take off a week. We'll have a week on each side and we'll be done. But our walls are textured, and I think we just didn't plan for how much extra time it takes to paint a textured wall.
Really?
So it took longer than we originally intended, but it was so much fun, Chris, that now I keep saying, we need another project, or we need to paint the house again. Let's change the colors. It's been 3 weeks.
Well, all you have to do is walk in Lowe's or Home Depot, and they will help you figure out where to spend your money. I'm sure.
I know. That's the scary thing. You're so right.
It's so expensive.
You're right. Although when we started on Memorial Day, they were doing a big sale on paint. So we got back almost $200, which was, great.
So you must live, I don't know where you live. I'm just going to guess. Is it got to be the Southwest or that area? If you got textured walls, either you're in a really old house or you got to be Southwestish. Am I right?
Southeast. I'm in Florida. But I'm in a house that is Spanish design.
Yep.
And I don't know if that has anything to do with it.
That's what I was thinking. Yeah.
Yeah, because you would be right then.
That's cool. I forgot about
Where
Florida.
Are you?
Florida has a lot of Memphis. So I am right in the middle.
Tennessee.
Yeah. And it's great. I like it here. This is home. Been home ever since the beginning.
Oh, it has? Wow.
Yeah, it's great.
Well, the South is always, my parents are Southern, so the South it has a nice genteel feel to it.
Are your parents Floridians, or are they just Southern?
No, actually they are, they're Georgia. They're from Georgia.
That's true South right there.
That is, you can't get more South. Or, equally South in other places. But then they moved up to New York City after they got married out of college. And which was where I was raised. Mm-hmm. And then about 10 years ago, I was drowning and floundering in PTSD in New York City, and I just said to them, I need to get out of here.
Yeah.
So I convinced my whole family, my brother, my parents, everybody relocated.
Wow, really?
South Florida with me.
So the move, because of PTSD, wasn't you out on your own, or you and your spouse, or something like your family, like they let the kid, and it's in a way, I mean, it is what it is, but they said, hey, this kid needs this, we'll move. It wasn't like, let's get counseling and deal with it here. Whoa.
Yeah.
That's really supportive.
And I should say that it wasn't all that hard on them. My parents are Southern, so coming back below the Mason-Dixon line was fine with them.
Yeah.
And my brother has a 35-foot sport fishing yacht, so it was
perfect.
pretty easy to lure him to a place where his boat could be in the water year round.
Yeah, I guess so.
So it wasn't exactly a hardship.
That's great. How
Yeah.
fun.
It worked out really well.
So I'm pulling up your notes here, and if I ever look down at my phone, I'm actually making notes on just the audio edits that I want to make sure we don't miss anything. And I kind of flag the guy who helps us figure all this audio stuff out with where like key quotes are and stuff like that, so we can really make sure we hone in and get those right. But can you just kind of, before we really start this thing, so I can make sure I get it right, I'm reading your bio here, and it's obviously amazing. But tell me, like, I'm trying to see, maybe I should just wait for the interview. Maybe I should just ask the questions. But I want to know where the real PTSD thing started for you. And is it one event, or is it like lots of little events? And, you know, maybe I should just I'm going to wait for the interview, because that's a better question there, because I want to hear the straight answer the first time, and everybody else can hear it with me that way too. How about that?
That's fine.
Okay. And
I'm very easy. So as we go into this, Chris, I've had my own radio show. I have a background in theater. I do a lot of public speaking, and I do a lot of interviews. So trust me when I tell you, I'm good on my feet. I'm great at improv. I will follow you wherever you go. I'm completely comfortable and 100% transparent.
Awesome.
So you can ask me anything. So just have fun with your own creativity, and just know I'm going to follow you where you go.
Okay, that's great. Well, we sent you that episode, or not the episode, but the Interview 101 document that kind of walks through, here's the 5 questions and how we do it. I stick with that. It's pretty straightforward. And this is not about me. I'm not one of those people who likes to tell my story, and you being here is another excuse for me to talk.
Right.
I really want to hear you. So we're asking a lot of people the same questions, and really getting a world demographic of what hope is to people from different walks of life. So I could tell when we first started talking, you're not scared of the microphone, and that's great. I appreciate that. Some people are.
I'm not.
All right, so let's see here. It's Michele Rosenthal. That's the right pronunciation.
It's actually Michele. If you really want to be,
I thought this is easy. You're not even from another country. I'm gonna nail this.
The Beatles song. It's Michele, my belle.
Awesome. That's great. Michele Rosenthal. That's cool.
Yeah, chalk it up to my parents needed an M name.
Yeah.
And it was 1968, and the Beatles song was big.
So it's legit. It was after the Beatles song.
It actually, it was after they needed an M name because I'm named after my grandfather.
Okay.
But after that, it was either Michele because of the Beatles song, or Margot. And thank God my father didn't like Margot.
I know somebody named Margot, a grandmother.
Okay, don't tell her I said that.
I think she's a Margaret. Everybody calls her Margot, but I think she's a Margaret. She's like 85. There's no way she's a Margot, just plain old Margot. I don't know. All right. Well, let's do this. So I'm going to mark down here where we need to start this thing on the audio, and we'll cut loose. And again, I'll ask the 5 questions. I'm going to jump in and kind of say, we're talking to Michele Rosenthal, and then a little quick snippet from me. And then I'll say, what are you doing today? What's going on in your world? Whatever. You can tell me what you had for breakfast, or that you took your dog for a walk 5 minutes ago, whatever you want to say. And then we'll chit for a second, and then we'll kind of get into the real stuff. Sound good?
That sounds great.
Okay. So, here we go. Michele Rosenthal, so cool to have you with us. This is a lot of stuff that I personally look forward to, because PTSD happens to be something that is on my list of daily to weekly battles, depending on the day or the week, that makes me feel like an absolute fool or an idiot, because it just doesn't make a lot of sense to me or some people around me, and that's life. I guess it's kind of a confusing one, but you've got a really cool story, and you've got a really great background, and you are published all over the place. You speak everywhere. You won awards for all the work you're doing and what you're writing. So thanks, first of all, for taking the time to spend with me and with the Hope Tribe here. It's really great to have you. And you're in Florida, I think. Is that right?
I am. Chris, thank you so much for inviting me. I think the global initiative project that you have about hope is so, first of all, it's so creative, and I love the diversity of the people that you're interviewing. But second of all, I think it's so important because I think everything or anything that we achieve and succeed at begins with hope, the hope that we can do it. So I'm delighted to participate. And yes, I am here in what is not so sunny South Florida today.
Are you like
Southeast
near
Florida.
the beach? Can you see the waves?
I'm about a 10-minute bike ride from the beach, so I can't
perfect.
see the waves, but I can almost hear them.
That's so great. Wow, that's really great. Well, so you in Florida, what's your daily life like? Are you writing constantly, speaking constantly? I mean, you've got a lot on your plate besides just being a regular human.
I do. Well, we're all, as regular humans, we have the other higher aspirations that we each allow to define our lives. And mine really is so related to helping trauma survivors of all types to navigate the maze of post-trauma living. So whether that's combat veterans, a sexual assault, child abuse, life-threatening illness, domestic violence, I work with everybody, and my goal is really to help everybody find their way back out of the darkness and into the light. And so a typical day in South Florida begins at the beach, because if you live near the beach, you have to start your day there, I think. So start the beach, a nice beach walk with the dog, and then it's, I write, I speak, I do workshops and seminars, and I work with clients. So any day, and what I really love about my job is every day is different. So it's always a mixture of those things, and then a good long yoga class at the end, just to sort of stress release,
Yeah.
stretch, and settle in for an evening. So it's a good way to spend the day, feeling like you're helping people. And so much of it is predicated on my own personal experience. So every day it's like turning my own tragedy into something meaningful and helpful. And that feels really good, to have learned things and be able to pass it on to ease someone else's pain and suffering.
That's really cool. That's my goal in this process of interviewing so many people that are so far ahead of the game that I am, is just figuring out how do I turn what feels like a bad day into a good day, because I get to use something that was bad for something that's good. So I don't want to get there yet, because those are answers to questions in a few minutes, but I'm looking forward to learning. I really am. I'm going to take notes like crazy. Let me ask you question one. We're asking 1,000 people around the planet, kind of a true cross-section slice of global population data that we're getting, exactly what they think about hope, believe about it, how they're using it, what they've experienced with it. So let me ask you these questions. Question one is, what's your favorite definition or your favorite quote about hope?
Oh, my favorite definition. Can I tell you both? My favorite definition and my
Some people
favorite
give me
quote?
4 or 5. It's fine with me. I'm all ears.
Okay, I'm just going to give you 2. My favorite definition of hope is the desire to have something that is so deep within you, you can already feel it, even though you don't yet have it.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
That to me is hope. And my favorite quote is anonymous, and it is just 2 words: I hope.
Wow.
Because really it's anonymous because so many people have already said it, and it's anonymous because so many people can say it. But I think those are 2 of the most profound words, and we can flower it up in a million different ways. There are wonderful quotes about hope, but I think distilling it down to just those 2 words that be in a sentence that begins with I makes hope come to settle within you. Mm-hmm. And that's where it comes from originally, and that's what we need to access to be able to utilize it. So I like, if we're going to use quotes as ways to stimulate inspiration and imagination, let's use one that stimulates our own self-creation at the same time.
Wow. Well said. It's so simple. I don't think I've heard that yet. It's so simple. It's a sentence that I rarely use or start a sentence with I hope. I'm scared to use it too much because it's pretty fragile for me, but it's one, those 2 words are really valuable to me. They really are. The beginning of a lot of things. So if that's the case, that quote and that statement of I hope, who has given you that type of hope? Who's really helped you along the way? And we can get into the story here in a second of really where you've come from, or you can flip it around and start with question 3 and tell us a story of, and kind of your background, your life, either way you want to go. But I want to know who's given you a lot of hope. And I also want to know kind of what's going on back there that's driven you to need so much hope or share so much.
Let's say that we'll do it sort of 2 and 3 and then 3 and 2. And then
Any way you want to go. Yeah. Just share it out there.
Because, well, I'll start with front and center. My mother is the person that always gave me hope, because I was drowning for almost 30 years. And while everybody else, didn't know what to do with me or abandoned me, my mother kept continuing to say, you're here. You can do this. You absolutely can do this. And it started when I was 13. She started saying that to me in a moment where, if I didn't have hope in that moment, I would never have ever had it at any other moment. When I was 13, I had an allergic reaction to a medication that turned me essentially into a full body burn victim. My body could not metabolize the medication. It sent it out through the skin, and I literally lost 100% of the first 2 layers of my skin to these enormous blisters that required me to be placed in a quarantine burn unit hospital room for a few weeks. And at the time, in 1981, there was no Google. So, when my mom started noticing that I was having symptoms of something that didn't seem right, she took me to all these doctors, allergists, ophthalmologists, because something was wrong with my eyes and my skin, and, a physician, and everyone kept telling her, go home. You're just being such a Jewish mother. She has a virus. Let her sleep it off. And my mom kept saying, this is not normal. This is not the way my daughter experiences a virus. And they made her feel ridiculous. And there was no place that she could type in the symptoms that I have and have it pop up and answer. So a week later, when my skin started to erupt, she took me back to the doctor, and the doctor, I so clearly remember the doctor examining me and then sitting down across from my parents and I saying, I have no idea what's happening. So we have 2 choices. You can go home and see how it goes, or you could go to the hospital now. And all of the adults in the room turned and looked at me. What do you want to do? Wow. I remember thinking in that moment, oh my God, if none of the adults around me know what to do, we'd better go to the hospital.
Mm-hmm. And how old are you? How old are you at this point? How old are you?
I was 13.
Wow, that's big stuff.
It is. It's heavy for a kid to make that kind of decision. And when I've spoken to my mom about it, like, what? How could everyone leave that up to me? She said, none of us could process what was happening. We didn't know what was happening. So it was a good thing we went to the hospital, because within 24 hours, things were horrible. And none of the doctors had ever seen what was happening to me. And we know now that what I survived was toxic epidermal necrolysis syndrome, which is a fancy way of saying that all of your skin dies and falls off. Whoa. And today, when that happens, patients are immediately put into a coma, and they're not brought out until it's over. But in 1981, because none of my doctors had ever seen this before, and I was at a big hospital in New York City, a teaching hospital, so they thought they'd seen everything, but they had not seen this, and they didn't know what to do. And there's nothing to do to stop the progression of the illness. So, eventually what happened was I was just completely incapacitated and for a series of weeks. And the reason I started to tell you this story was there was a day that I so vividly recall. I felt myself dying, and I felt myself lifting up and leaving my body. And I remember thinking, oh, thank God, because the pain was so indescribable that I didn't have it in me anymore to manage it. I mean, there were blisters everywhere, including my eyes, so I was blinded for a period of time, my mouth, everything, and I just thought I'd rather die. So I remember feeling myself leave my body and thinking, oh, this is awesome, because now I don't have to stay here. I just would like to be free of this body. It's a horrible place to be. And as I floated up toward the ceiling, there was a black tunnel ringed with white light, and I just felt myself being pulled like by a magnet to this, and it was very peaceful, and it felt wonderful, and this enormous, incredibly comforting energy just seemed to envelop me. And I remember thinking, before I go, I have to thank my parents, because they had been at my bedside for 2 weeks, 24/7 already. And so I paused the feeling, just coming back far enough to say, or not having gone far enough. I mean, I'm not really sure which, but I paused the pull toward the tunnel long enough to say to my parents, thank you, I love you, I'm dying. And in that moment, Chris, like if you had a kid, they said that to you, what would your response be?
You'd call the nurses or doctors or shake them awake or whatever.
I know, you would, right?
Yeah.
My mom didn't.
Really?
She was amazing. She's 5'2". She's this little Southern belle from Georgia. And she just put her face close to mine and she said, you are not going to die. She said, you better pull through. And I said to her, I don't have the strength. I feel it. I'm going. I feel it. And she said, Michele, you better go down deeper inside yourself than you've ever been. And you find the strength to pull yourself through. And I mean, as a kid, you're sort of automatically trained to do what your parents tell you. And as a human being, when someone's begging you to stay, you fight for that. Mm-hmm. So I did what she told me to do. I went down deeper inside myself than I'd ever been, and I found the strength to pull myself through. And Chris, that is, I think, the first time that I ever learned, and it was a lesson that my mom taught me, because she said to me at that moment, she said, courage is a choice. Make it. And I learned that we can choose, and even in the moments that we don't think we can do anything, I had to hope in that moment that she was right, that I could go further into myself than I'd ever been and find the strength, because I didn't think there was any further place to go. Wow. And I just allowed myself to hope that she knew what she was talking about. And of course, here I am today. So the first person that taught me the idea of hope was not direct, it was indirect. I had to hope that she was right, but it was her challenge to me to do, to believe, to achieve something super difficult that made me back up and start from the place of, I hope she's right. I hope I can do this. And throughout, throughout the rest of, the next 30 years, because I was released from the hospital, I made a full physical recovery. You look at me, I'm so lucky. I do not look like other survivors of my illness who actually do look like burn victims. I had amazing care. And I came out of the hospital knowing I'm going to make a full physical recovery. I have scars, but they're not, anything that will stop me from being able to do what I want to do. I have some physical remnants of things that need to be kept up with and dealt with, but on the whole, I'm perfectly fine. I'm healthy. I'm okay. But emotionally, I just was not resilient. I fell into that black, deep place of depression and memories and anxiety and all the things that come with that. And it was my mother through all of those years, 24 years of thinking I was crazy until I was actually diagnosed with PTSD, and then a few more years of recovery. All that time, my mom constantly there saying to hope, to continue to connect with the idea that things could get better. And that's a gift, that's a gift when someone gives you that, and you can give it to yourself. But when someone has the opportunity to give it to you, it's enormously lucky.
You're lucky to have your mom, but she's lucky to have you, and you're lucky to have you. You're so, you mentioned the word courage a minute ago. Courageous and brave are things that come to mind, and those are often used words, but they're different. The courage thing really goes back to a place where you have a choice and have to make a logical series of decisions to take action on something that's way bigger than you, which is exactly what you did. Even though it was the challenge of someone older and wiser than you who is pulling you along and giving you that hope, you took very deliberate actions, knowing you had a choice to get out and be safe in a sense, just by dying. The bravery thing is what we picture when somebody runs into a burning building or jumps in front of the train to snatch a kid out of the way or something like that. That's not thinking ahead, just an instantaneous reaction to a big event. Really, those two things, I don't know that I've talked to somebody who I think really gets both of those two in one story, because usually it's one or the other. And you were both brave very quickly and with lots of unknown data in front of you, and very courageous to make some decisions that you knew sticking around is going to cause a lot of pain, and you're doing it for very distinct reasons. I'm impressed at a 13-year-old who can think that way. Why do you think that going through a major illness, a lot of people think PTSD, well, sure. I mean, there's the guys who come back from war, and then there's the people who've been, with some big trauma situation where they've been sexually assaulted and left to die in the back of some alley. And of course, those are, PTSD situations, but I don't think people really realize that that's something that could be common for people who check into a hospital and check back out some weeks later with a big, serious illness. Why is that?
Well, I think there's just a lack of education. Studies even now are coming out that 1 in 3 cancer patients ends up with PTSD. I think it's 1 in 4 heart attack victims end up with
Really?
PTSD. I mean, we're getting a lot of research coming up now in the different segments of the quote-unquote survivor market, for lack of or the survivor population,
Sure.
for lack of a better way of saying it. I think that the media skews their coverage toward the military. So, I mean, I speak so many places, and so many places that I speak, someone will come up to me prior to my keynote or my presentation and find out I'm speaking on PTSD, and they say, "Oh, you're going to talk about veterans."
Exactly.
And I have the utmost respect for our veterans. I've worked with them. I've helped them. I love them. And yet I'm always quick to say it's not just the veterans who struggle with this. And I think we have a big, PTSD has a PR problem. It just, the media seems to only want to talk about it in terms of veterans. And yet the veteran population, while significant and honorable, is a small part of over 25 million people with PTSD on any given day. And that's a
Wow.
conservative guesstimate that does not include people who aren't diagnosed.
Wow.
So
That's a
it's-
conservative
so I
estimate of the
think that's the problem.
diagnosable cases, you're saying, the ones that are already documented.
Yeah, I mean, we have so
Wow.
many people like me. I went 24 years thinking I was insane. I mean, Chris, I literally used to say to myself, some people are meant to be crazy. I'm one of them. And I was able to really justify and rationalize that in my head because I've been a writer since I was 7, way before my trauma. Writers are crazy. The geniuses are insane. And so I always thought, well, this could be really good for my art.
Yeah, I can make some money off of this one. Yeah.
Yeah, and I study so many creative artists over the years of my PTSD. I was constantly reading selected letters, unedited diaries of visual artists, painters, sculptors, writers, poets, directors, because I was fascinated by the creative process. And there's so much mental illness and genius mixed in together in that population. And I thought, well, this is great. I fit right in. So for a long time, I just accepted that. Well, I'm not unique. There are millions of people thinking this is just what's normal for me. And the sad fact is that we accept that that's what's normal when it's so far from the case. We could have a much better life if we just understood what had gone wrong and figured out how to fix it.
Wow. So you took 24 years before you finally got some help that really targeted PTSD. So were you coping with that in healthy ways, unhealthy ways? And what led you to the point of finally getting somebody to say, I know what this is, and here's what you do next?
Oh, that's a really good question. All right. Well, first, I was coping in very unhealthy ways. Because my trauma was medically related, I was very afraid of drugs, alcohol, anything that would
Sure.
alter my body chemistry. So
Yeah.
I stayed away from that, which is a very normal response for PTSD survivors, is to self-medicate. My My self-destructive habits were more in line with, I became anorexic, horribly, horribly anorexic. So that, I decided I'm going to control this body.
Yeah.
And nothing is going to get into this body.
Nothing.
And I'm going to be safe because, I was terrified just to take a Tylenol. If a little antibiotic for a run-of-the-mill infection can just about kill you, what can a Tylenol do?
Wow.
Who knows?
Yeah.
So it was partly based on I'm going to control my body and my life down to every tiny little second so that I see the next surprise coming and I can avert the danger. And that's what many of us do. And the other side was I got into this weird self-destructive loop of the more in pain I was, physically or emotionally, the more safe and alive I felt. Because, and that's part of the distortion of trauma. So I did not cope well. I muddled around and, ruined relationships and friendships and family occasions and events and could not sustain a career or develop any kind of professional persona, and was constantly having meltdowns that would require me to move back home with my parents until I could get back on my feet and go back to the city and get a job until the next meltdown, and I started all over. I mean, my poor father had to drive to Philadelphia and pack me up and bring me home. My mom would come into New York City and pack me up and bring me home. So things were not well, but in between the meltdowns, I would, do my best to make a life. And then eventually something triggered me. I know that now. I didn't understand it then. But something triggered me to a point where my body imploded. I had a slew of medical problems, liver, stomach, intestine, my whole body was just shutting down. And while we were doing all of these tests and meeting with specialists, and they thought I had liver cancer, they thought I had celiac disease, my hair was falling out by the handful, and nobody could figure out what was wrong. And it was at that point when I was not only anorexic but now losing weight because my body was shutting down, that I realized I needed help. I couldn't survive another day without some kind of mental health professional help.
So it wasn't just the anorexia that was causing all that. You weren't just starving yourself and depriving nutrition. You were actually, the stress was actually eating away at your body's ability to just deal with anything, reproduce cells. I mean,
Chris, you're so right. That's exactly what it was. Because, well, I'll tell you something interesting. On my radio show, I interviewed a psychiatrist who was also a scientist, and he said to me, Michele, the fact is, the mind is capable of producing 50% more stress than the body can handle.
Whoa.
That's amazing, right?
That is amazing.
And so the body will start to break down because the stress is too much. And we know just from simple basics, when you increase your stress, you decrease your immunity. So your body starts to suffer that way. And I think years of chronic anorexia didn't help things. But the amount of stress that was going on was shutting down my organ functions. And the great footnote here is, once I healed the mental stuff, I mean 100% of the physical ailments that I had went away. My liver's perfectly fine today. Nobody can explain it.
Wow.
My intestines, perfectly fine. My stomach had just flat out stopped working. I was taking medication just to be able to digest food. And my stomach's fine now. I mean, I've put on all the weight. I feel fantastic. So it speaks so much, Chris, to the connection between the body and the mind, both in terms of how the mind can destroy the body and how it can heal as well.
Wow. I'm impressed at that. Not just at your willpower to get through it, but I'm impressed that our minds are that strong or unfortunately that damaged that it causes so much pain or so much good. So, wow. I got a lot of questions, but we just don't have all day. So what did you do? How did you get from, everything falling apart to, you said several years later, through several years of therapy, you got back into a healthy position. What does that look like? I mean, did you find a specialist? Did a hospital recommend it?
You
Where'd
know,
you
I'm
go?
so glad you asked that because no, this was in the mid 90s when PTSD was not as well I don't know if it was I don't know if well known is not is the right word, but nobody's talking about PTSD in the mid 90s. And I went into therapy just to learn how to be a chronic patient. I just had accepted my life as this. I am not only am I crazy, my body's falling apart, and I just don't know how to live like that. And so I went into therapy, and the first thing that my therapist did was teach me transcendental meditation. He said, "You're just so anxious and strung out. You need to learn to relax." And so that was enormously helpful. I still practice TM today. It's one of my favorite things. I just feel so good. So I'm not using it to control anxiety anymore because I wake up feeling completely calm and blissful in the morning. Now I do it because I just feel so good and energized all day.
Wow.
So the first thing he did was teach me that. The second thing was to start working with some energy processing to process out. He understood that my trauma was causing anxiety. So we used a lot of emotional freedom technique, thought field therapy, tapas acupressure technique, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, all of those energy and information processing techniques
Yeah.
that got me functional. And I was so grateful for that. I was able to go back to work and put together more and more years of sustainable productivity. But I wasn't free of my symptoms. I was just managing them better.
Okay. Yeah.
And then another trigger came, and I fell apart. Like all the hard work we'd done just completely fell apart. And it was at that point that I said, okay, we have to go about this another way. Because if you could put in 5 hard years of healing and have it all undone by one very significant trigger, what's the point?
Yep.
And it was at that point, Chris, and I think this is really the main element that really is the focus of everything that you talk about and why we're here today. It's having that hope in yourself and saying, okay, I'm going to show up for me more than I've ever done before, and I hope it's enough. Because I started thinking maybe there's more to what's going on here than what we've talked about. My therapist never once talked about PTSD. I'd never heard of PTSD. But what I did one day, because I was all of a sudden one day I realized I was so terrified, and it's a longer story, so I won't get into how I got there. But I just realized I lived in this state of terror, and I had since I was 13. And I started researching my illness, my original trauma, my illness. Researching that led me to research about trauma. And that led me to research about dissociation. I thought, oh my God, I'm not crazy. I live like this. There's a name for it. And the research about dissociation led me to PTSD research. And this is the beauty of Google.
Yeah.
And all the
Welcome to the internet. Yeah.
Yeah. And there was a PTSD self-test. It had 22 questions based on the criteria, the diagnostic criteria from the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual. 22 questions. I answered positively to 20 of them. And I thought, okay, well, what do I do with this? So I took it to my therapist and I said, hey, look, I did this self-test. 20 out of 22 questions I answered positively. Do you think I have PTSD? And I was very quick to tell him, I don't think I have PTSD because I don't have flashbacks all the time. And he said, and I didn't want the label, but I don't know. I just felt the need to show him this test. And so I said, do you think I have PTSD? And he looked at me and he said, what is PTSD?
No.
I swear that was his comment.
Time to pick up a phone book and wow.
Well, that's the thing. You're right. Because, what I love about this story is it's really about self-advocacy, and it's about learning to just keep saying to yourself, what do I do now? What do I do now? What do I do now? Because I was faced with that question, what do I do now? I'm working with someone that doesn't seem to understand that if you're answering 20 out of 22 questions positively to a PTSD self-test, which is a high indication that you have PTSD, you need to be working with someone who gets it. And I had never heard of trauma therapists before. I was just with a psychologist. So at that point, I found myself a trauma therapist, and I put it all in front of her. And she said, I don't think you need to ask me that question. So, working with somebody who understood that I really was dealing with issues of trauma beyond just needing to process out the energy of trauma was helpful. And then I started to understand, and this is where the process starts to wrap itself up. I could not heal by talking about it. And I think it's really important to just share that fact, because so often we're told, well, you need to tell the story again and again until
Right.
it no longer bothers you.
Absolutely. That's the way I'm currently dealing with mine. Is I've not seen a trauma therapist, and I'm trying to figure out how do I beat this thing. And honestly, all the physical fitness and all the healthy lifestyle and all the talking about it and just letting it go and being in community with other people who are dealing with it and helping it just doesn't cut it, to be quite honest. It's still there.
Of course it's still there.
So what then do you do? I mean, what does trauma therapy mean, or where are you going with that?
Well, we're all different. So I'll preface my comments by saying every one of us is unique in our trauma. We are completely universal in our PTSD experience. And then we are unique and individual in our recovery process. So each of us has to find the thing that works for us. For some people, EMDR, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, is the be-all, end-all. For me, I couldn't bear it. I dropped out of it. I couldn't stand it. It made me feel so much worse. For days, I'd get lost in this black despair. So we all have to be really aware of the feedback we get from ourselves. This works for me. I can handle this, or this really doesn't work. So that having been said, here's what I learned in my recovery. We have a conscious mind and a subconscious mind. Talk therapy is great, and it has a wonderful place in the recovery process. The problem is it only engages your conscious mind. Your conscious mind is just 12% of your brain. 12%.
It's about 5% for me.
Okay, well, it could be. But that's good, because that means your subconscious mind has even more of a real estate. If we have 88 or 90% of our brain as the subconscious mind is where we house all of our beliefs, all of our long-term memories, everything that every motivation that we have for responding to the world comes from the subconscious mind and the patterns and the programming that are instilled there. And so it's amazing to me that trauma therapy could ever suggest that we could heal just in the conscious mind, where that's just short-term memory and logic and reason and decision making.
Yeah, but those deep-rooted feelings and fears, they have to be in the subconscious, I'm assuming.
Right, and they drive how we logically reason and decision make.
Okay.
So ignoring the subconscious mind, to me, it's like, well, how could you possibly try to heal that way? Not you, Chris. I mean, in general, like,
Yeah,
why
I got it,
would
yeah.
anybody not be saying we need to attack both sides? And maybe attack is not the right word. We need to engage both sides. But in my PTSD recovery felt like a battle. So my metaphors are all related that way.
I like that. I'm with you there.
That's the way it feels, right? It's like you're fighting, and you're fighting for your life, and you're fighting against yourself, and you're fighting against something you can't even see.
How did you tackle the subconscious then?
I did not believe in it, but I heard an ad. I was driving in the car, and I heard an ad for hypnosis can cure a nicotine addiction. And by then, I had researched trauma and PTSD enormously. I'd read all the theory back to the 1800s when trauma psychology started to really develop. And I'd read from the 1800s to today, Bessel van der Kolk, the god of everything PTSD right now. And I'd read all of it, and I really had come to see PTSD as two things. Number one, an identity crisis. We get so lost in, well, I'm not who I was before, and I am not happy with who I am after, and I'm not really sure who I'm supposed to be. And we get stuck in the middle, in that gap in between. So there's a real identity crisis. We can't go back, and we don't know how to go forward, and we get stuck.
Yeah.
And the other thing is, it's like a trauma addiction. PTSD is just, I keep behaving in these unhappy, unhealthy ways over and over because I'm compelled by something outside of my control, even though I know this isn't good for me. And so when I heard this ad, that hypnosis could cure a nicotine addiction, this is where I was, Chris. I thought, well, if it can cure a nicotine addiction, why not a trauma addiction?
Absolutely.
And I'm not one who likes to have other people control my mind, so I wasn't feeling like, oh, this will be great. I'm just going to lie down and someone's going to get in there and do it for me. But what I did do was research hypnosis, and I interviewed, I kid you not, I called 7 different hypnotherapists and spoke to them on the phone for at least 30 minutes apiece, peppering them with questions about hypnosis and the hypnosis process and their experience with trauma survivors and PTSD until I had culled myself down to 2, and I chose one. One guy said, I whittled it down to 2. I won't tell you who they were. One is very, very famous, and he told me he could use hypnosis and cure me in a day. We would start at 9 in the morning and just keep working until we were done.
No, really?
And I thought that sounded exhausting and overwhelming and pretty scary.
Wow. But he had the confidence that he could really pull that off. I don't know whether to believe that or not. I just don't know enough about it. That's incredible.
I know. I've met him since then at a conference, and for me, it was not the right thing. I decided to opt for a woman who said, look, we're just going to take it one session at a time and see how it goes.
Yeah.
I thought, oh, that feels so much safer to me.
Yeah.
So I went, and I didn't believe in it, and I thought the first session was totally ridiculous and idiotic, and I came out of there, telling my family, well, that was another waste of money and time, and it's not going to help at all.
And did you get hypnotized the first time? Like, did you get
I did.
Okay, but you still felt like, what in the world? Magic tricks, here we go. Or something like that?
Yeah, because Chris, I felt like I was totally conscious the whole time.
Okay.
I mean, I was literally saying to myself while she was hypnotizing me, this is ridiculous. You want me to what? What a stupid image. Because her little critical mind can keep going. And so I thought it hadn't worked. Chris, that night I went to sleep. And for the first time in over 25 years, I slept straight through the night, 8 hours, no nightmare. And I woke up the next morning feeling calm.
Wow.
And I thought, what's wrong with this picture?
Wow.
And over every night for the next 4 or 5 nights that happened until Chris, by the end of the week, I was a nervous wreck. And I called the hypnotherapist. I said, something's gone really wrong. And she said, well, what is it? And I said, I don't know. Every night I'm sleeping really well. I don't have any nightmares. And I wake up feeling this weird state of bliss. And she said, well, what's wrong with that? I said, well, it just feels so good. It's making me anxious. So, in a nutshell, there's more to it than that. And I don't know how much time we have left, but it just, we find a recovery in bits and pieces. And all the work that I'd done up until hypnosis was cumulative. It's not like I walked into hypnosis cold and it was the first thing I did and it was this panacea. It's that everything we do matters, and it's like putting money in the bank of recovery, and we just keep trying stuff until we find the combination that opens the lock.
That's a really great way to say that, because it really is a journey. And you've explained a few things to me today that I obviously want to pursue learning more about, because I feel like I'm getting a little stuck in my journey, and it's frustrating, and you know the feelings. And I want to be moving. And you're right, though. Maybe I couldn't have got to this place if I hadn't taken the last step. But it is, every little step does matter.
It does. It does. Even the time we take off. Before I went for hypnosis, I crashed and burned in my recovery. And I went for hypnosis, it was like in October. But in January, I was practically suicidal. The January before that, I was in such a pit of despair. And this little voice in me said, I just think we need to feel something the opposite of this despair. And that little voice, we usually just brush it off because it's so little and it's so soft, and what does it know? And the other fear voice is so loud and so strong and so sure of itself. And I had listened because I had nothing else to do. I was at such a point of I have nothing left to lose, that I listened to that little voice when it said we need to feel the opposite of this despair. And to me, the opposite of that despair would be joy. To you, maybe it would be peace or calm or bliss or whatever it is. We all have our thing that's the opposite. And I knew that when I dance, I feel joy. And, living in New York City, I could dance my heart out any night to escape the way I was feeling. But I had moved to this tiny little beach town, and there's no nightclub. So I literally, Chris, I signed up for a dance class every single night of the week. Every single night.
That's awesome.
Monday was West Coast swing. Tuesday was salsa. Wednesday was East Coast swing. Thursday was Argentine tango. I mean, I literally went to a dance class every night of the week just to force myself to do something that would make me feel joy. It was like my little joy quest. But really at the bottom of it, it was me looking for some kind of life-affirming feeling. And for each of us, that is incredibly important in the recovery process. Because over a series of months, the more I did that, the more I started training my brain to look for those moments of joy, those life-affirming instances. The more I experienced them day after day after day. It didn't matter if I hadn't slept. It didn't matter if I looked like The Walking Dead. I went to the dance classes. And even if I didn't feel like talking to anybody, I went. And what that did was train me to re-engage with a part of myself that felt good, that felt alive, and alive in an okay way. And over a period of time, I started to sleep more than 2 hours a night, which was what I was used to. I started sleeping maybe 4 hours a night, which was a big improvement to me. And I started to feel hope that things could get better. And that gave me courage. And that was why when I heard that commercial for hypnosis, I felt courageous enough to go do something that was completely against everything I thought I believed in and give it a try. So we have to always, to bring this back to your main mission, it's that hope is so important to feed because it allows us to be open to opportunities and creative and engage in moments where we might have otherwise shut down. And it's that little bit of hope that brings us the next step and the next step and the next step.
Awesome. Challenging and awesome. So what are you doing now? Now you're, well known and speaking about PTSD and sharing your story, and you're just leading a ton of people. So tell us about your mission now as somebody who's survived it, come through it, and I guess still working on it, as seems like recovery never stops for a lot of people. I don't know if that is the case for you, but what are you doing now to keep sharing hope with other people?
Well, I think we're all different in our recoveries. I've been free of symptoms for almost a decade. I have had an enormous trigger 2 years ago that was a medical trigger.
Ooh,
so I was able to test out all my skills.
Yeah.
And so I was very pleased to come through that and be very aware. I did it. I'm really free because not only am I still symptom free, that didn't cause me any problems at all. So I think all of us are, back to the idea of being individual, we all get to different places in our recovery depending on opportunities and who we are and our history. So I think we all reach whatever's right for us and wherever we decide. Some people, I literally, in the beginning of the work that I did, thought everyone wanted to heal. And now I'm very careful not to promote or discuss that because some people really don't. So to me, healing is, I want to be free of symptoms. To other people, they'll feel healed if they manage their symptoms better. So I think it's important to let everybody decide what it is that they want and feel comfortable with. And so my real job is to continue raising awareness, to educate people so they understand where PTSD comes from. The causes are very varied, and PTSD is way more prevalent than the general population understands. And also to keep writing and helping. I feel like we're all in this together. Even at 100% recovery, we all are walking the same path. We're survivors. So in every moment, that means we know each other in a way different than anyone else on earth does. We know what it means to have your soul ripped from you. We know what it means to have your heart broken by experience and your spirit tested. So we all know what it means to be in that place of fear and pain and have to continue to live. So for me, today is the official release date of my new book, Heal Your PTSD, Dynamic Strategies That Work.
Wow.
one of the ways I continue to give back, because I feel it's so important that since we're all in this together, we work together. And so I'm a writer. Since I've always been a writer, that's how I do.
Yeah.
So Heal Your PTSD is, I literally, it's over 200 strategies of how to daily cope with and heal PTSD.
Amazing. And today, like literally today while we're talking, is the release date.
Oh, it is. Yes.
Wow. How cool is that?
Yes, it is. So thank you so much for joining the party today.
I'm glad to join the party. I wish this is not live, so everybody listening to it. These happened a few weeks ago, but this is really cool. I want to make sure that we get that on our show notes page for people who are listening and running or in the grocery store or whatever, so they can go back and find it. So where do we find that and all of you and your stuff? Where are you hanging out online?
Hit up the healmyptsd.com website. There's information about all of my books there. There's podcasts. I've over 100 free podcasts interviewing the top minds in PTSD and trauma recovery.
Wow.
We have a webinar training series, also completely free, the science behind your symptoms, so that you can start to understand you are not crazy. PTSD causes neurophysiological, biological, and chemical changes in the brain and the body that create your symptoms. So that is a very important thing to understand, because so often, and Chris, you can tell me if you've ever felt this way, but so often we blame ourselves.
Yep.
And that's so inaccurate. So there's all kinds of really great, helpful stuff about PTSD, recovery, treatment, and the books and the blog. It's all in one place, healmyptsd.com. And we also have access to a free forum, so you can find support 24/7.
That's a lot of help right there. So healmyptsd.com. And so social media links, all of that is right there. We can find it all there.
All there.
Perfect.
Facebook, Twitter, the whole shebang.
All right. So last question, number 5. Give me the ABCs, 1, 2, 3, some simple steps to start healing. So PTSD happens to be part of my package, and I'm sure people are listening to it as well may have that, or someone they know who's dealing with it. Where do I go from here? Day 1. We just talked. What do I do next?
All right. Number 1, find ways to reinforce your hope, because everything begins with hope. And when we lose touch with our hope is when we sink deeper into the despair. So even if that just means starting with where we started our conversation, the idea, I hope. And just carrying that little intention. So much in PTSD recovery, we have expectations. Here's how it's going to go. And if I do this and this and this, it's going to lead me here. And that is never the way that it goes. So to me, it's all about intention, more intention, less expectation. Intention being, how are you going to show up each day? Okay. How are you going to approach the recovery process? And approaching it, to me, starts with, I hope I can do this. So that's step 1. Step 2 is figuring out how to deepen your belief that that hope is valid and that you actually can do this. So it's starting to create your new identity and building it around the belief, I am a person who can do this. You know, every fear, Susan Jeffers said it best. She wrote, feel the fear and do it anyway. I love her whole philosophy is that at the bottom of every fear, and that's really essentially what PTSD is, at the bottom of every fear is this simple idea, I can't handle it. So to me, step 2 in the recovery process is figuring out what you need in order to believe I can handle it. Because so much of PTSD recovery is terrifying, or at least it was for me. I was so afraid I was going to get lost in my head and no one was going to be able to pull me back out. And so afraid of what was going to come up that I had worked so hard to suppress and keep down. So it starts with hope, then we bolster it with belief, and then the third thing, which we were just talking about, is creating those life-affirming experiences for you. And it doesn't have to be big. I mean, for me, I committed to a 60 or even an hour and 20 minutes of dance class every day, but it doesn't have to start that big. It can be 30 seconds of just closing your eyes and letting the breeze blow through your hair, just to be in a sensation that feels good to be alive. Now, we don't always start out by saying, oh, I know exactly what to do. I stumbled into the realization that dance made me feel good. So we don't always know right away, but it's starting to look for where are those life-affirming moments that let me know that there's something here in me that exists outside of the trauma.
That makes sense.
And finding a way to connect to that.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. It really does. So I'm gonna write those down and put those on the interview section as well. So if you go to isharehope.com, listening in right now, you can jump over there whenever you get back to a place where you can grab some internet, and we'll have all the links, the notes, the steps, and all the important kind of pieces of this conversation that need to be drawn out, because this is really, really impactful stuff. It really is.
Chris, can I add 2 more steps?
You can go to 10. It's your day.
Okay, well, I think 5 is good. I think 5 is good.
That's great.
Not to be overwhelming, but after those 3, because those 3, hope, belief, and life affirming, those set the foundation. That's like the platform you stand on. And then on that platform, it's just 2 other things that cover a wide breadth of things. But number 1, it's research and education. It's having an open mind to keep looking for the answer and trying things. So it's educating yourself. What are my treatment options? What haven't I tried? What's the next step? It's constantly asking, what's the next step? So that's number 4. And number 5 is making the commitment to persevere, no matter how horrible, how terrifying the recovery process is, because it can be pretty terrifying. And going into it saying, no matter how bad it gets, I'm going to keep going, because it's that last element that pulls together the other 4. And without any one of those 5 elements, there's a little hole. But if you put all of those 5 elements together, you have a really good base upon which to build your recovery strategy. And then, unfortunately, there's no time frame. So it's not like we say, well, if I do this for 90 days, I'll be fantastic. It took me a couple of, I took all my years of therapy before my diagnosis and then a couple of years after that. So it can take a while, but it's so worth it when you're done. So the perseverance and the commitment of that 5th step are critical, because if you don't have it, you will walk away and you'll miss the final achievement. And so I think with all those 5 steps, you have an opportunity to put together a strategy. I'm
really glad you brought the last 2 in there, because that perseverance is big. I feel like a guy who perseveres. I love things that make me stick with them. It's just part of my wiring. But on this kind of thing, it turns out that it's easy to lose hope, because you try a bunch of things and they don't work. You try a bunch of things that don't work, or you relapse or whatever. And then all of a sudden, eventually you kind of like, I don't want to try something else, because it breaks my heart and yanks hope out from underneath me every time I try something and it doesn't work. So I'm scared to death that I might get too low on the hope reserves and just run out of steam sometime. But that perseverance is a big part of it. And
I think you're right. Sometimes we run on perseverance instead of hope.
That's a good point. That's a
because
great point.
Sometimes we just have to run on perseverance till we get to the next hope station, and we fill up.
That's a great way to say that. It really is. Great thoughts. All right, Michele, I want to take a quick snippet here. This will not be in the final recording. We're going to start. By the way, before I say that, you're just amazing. Like, for real. Thank you.
Oh, Chris, thank you. You were a great interviewer. I had tons of fun. I like chatting with somebody who's interactive, and you definitely are. So thank you.
I'm not BSing here. You're preaching the right story, and I'm the right audience. Just me personally. So what we'll do when we start the episode, we will find some awesome quote of yours that kind of best nails the content here. We'll put it at the very beginning of the audio feeds. When they hit play, they're going to hear you just immediately speaking. And then after about 30 seconds, you'll come on and say, after that quote, I'm Michele and I share hope, or I'm Michele Rosenthal and this is my organization and I share hope, whatever you want to do. So I'm gonna mute my side and let you just record a couple of your name and I share hope, or your name and anything you want to put in the middle and I share hope.
Okay.
Does that work? All right, I'm gonna mute.
Sure.
And Okay, I'm muted now, so you can.
Oh, are you
for it,
waiting
sorry.
I thought you were giving me a sign. Okay, so
Yeah,
Okay,
so
so
does
I'm
that make
gonna
sense?
count to 3 and then I'll do it.
Okay, I'm gonna.
Okay,
Yeah,
sorry.
I'll mute it right now. Okay, go. Start counting now.
Okay. Hey, I'm Michele Rosenthal and I share hope. Hey, this is Michele Rosenthal, the founder of HealMyPTSD.com, and I share hope. Hey, this is Michele Rosenthal, author of Heal My PTSD, Dynamic Strategies That Work. Oops, that was wrong. Scratch that. I have one more,
Go
and then
for
I'll
it.
let you choose.
This is
Ready?
great. Yeah.
Hey, I'm Michele Rosenthal, the author of Heal Your PTSD, Dynamic Strategies That Work, and I always share hope.
Love it.
All right,
Did
so
you just
choose.
get your book title wrong? Is that what you did?
I said Heal My PTSD because I'm so used to saying the website.
I love it. All right. So, a couple of random questions.
Yeah.
How in the world? So you're just hanging out, and all of a sudden one day you're like, big deep dark secrets that's kind of been awkward for me my whole life, and I think I'm gonna go up in front of an audience and just fire away and tell them all about it. How in the world do you get there from where you came from?
Oh, really easily, Chris, because when I finished my recovery, I had just turned 40. I had no job. I had no career. I had no family. I had no spouse. I had nothing. But the fact that I was a writer, and my brother said to me, well, why don't you just start blogging about what you've been through? And I thought, okay. I'd never blogged before. My brother set me up. He was like, here it is. It's Blogspot. Here's how you set up your account. And I just started writing about what I thought and what I felt. And I did it for me every day. I blogged, and I thought nobody is going to understand me because I survived this. I mean, what I survived happens to 1 in 2 million people. So nobody's going to get me. And I just kept writing anyway. And here's the interesting thing. The first people to start emailing me little notes and leaving comments on the blog saying, how do you know exactly how I feel? Or you just put into words exactly what I've been trying to say for 20 years. How did you do that? They were veterans.
Wow.
Vietnam, Desert Storm. They were veterans coming to the blog and saying I was describing them. And I kept writing back, I don't know how I'm doing that. I'm just describing me.
Wow.
But that it started to grow, and then it was like a little oasis in the desert. This little blog was this great watering hole, and we had survivors of everything coming to the blog. And they started asking me how I healed, and I started giving information. And then I thought, we need a real website. We need a site that gives all this information that's helpful, because I started understanding people don't get it. And then I went and I got trained, because you can't really help people heal if you don't have the proper training. So, so it just sort of snowballed one thing after another. And then these publishers came and said, would you like to write some books? And I said, well, by the way, I would love to.
Wow.
So it just, one thing led to another.
That's really, really cool. All right. So are you just a freaking awesome dancer? I mean, you sure?
I'm so good. I'm so good. I got to a point, I teach, I perform, and here's the fun part. You want to hear? I'll share with you.
Yeah.
I fell in love with my tango instructor.
Oh, that's awesome. That's so
and
classic.
we're
It's
still
a
together
movie.
today. He's the man who helped me paint the house.
No way.
Yes.
How great. That's totally a movie. Wow.
I know.
Like the whole thing's a movie, and especially since you fall in love with your dance instructor. That's just like the perfect
know,
Disney
right?
happy ending right there.
It does. It's like a nice Hollywood happy ending.
Yeah.
And we still, we dance all the time. So it's fun. And that's part of, I think, what can be so exciting about trauma recovery is you can discover who you are and create who you want to be so consciously. And it was just like that little thing of I want to feel joy that led me into this whole new life. And it was just such a small little hope that I had that I could feel joy, because I didn't think that it was possible. So it was just this little hope of, well, I hope that I can. Which was a point I guess we should have made when we were talking earlier, but you can't make all the points, I guess.
That's why
but
we
Chris,
should read your
thank you
book.
so much, because this has really been so much fun. You're so right there, and you get it, and you have a great personality and a sense of humor, which is not what I can say about every interview I have. So thank you.
Well, thank you for your time. I really do appreciate it. You've honestly been inspirational to me. I don't mean that just tongue in cheek. I really mean it. I've got some homework to do, based off of our conversation, because I need to move forward on some things. So, and it's very much PTSD related. So thanks for your time.
Well, if you have follow-up questions, just personally, feel free to shoot me a note, okay?
All right. I really will. Thank you. I would like to figure out where to go next on this stuff, because this is obviously part of my healing process. That's why I'm doing this. Is my version of your blog.
Yeah.
But I'm not down the road enough yet to say I'm done healing. But I don't mind sharing that I'm not. I just want to figure out how to get there. So
Yeah.
I'll fire a note back over.
Yeah,
Okay.
I think what you're doing is so smart, because it's that education piece, right? It's like you just keep looking and reading and informing until you never know when all the dots start to connect.
I figure if I ask 1,000 people about it, I may start learning something.
I think it's true. So you'll tell me when the episode goes live, and I'll send it out to my newsletter, and we'll put it up on all of our social media outlets.
Super fun. We will do the same. I can't wait to share it. Thanks so much, Michele. It's been great talking to you.
Chris, do you need any digital stuff, like photo, book cover, any of that stuff? I don't know how
Absolutely.
you like to set up your
Yes.
pages.
Send over the press pieces that you've got, whatever photo, book covers, the bio. You've already put one in our meeting here, but anything you want to add, we will put it on that interview page for sure. Just bring it on. We love that stuff, because I really want to point people to the right resources.
And visual stuff is engaging for an audience.
It is. Even if you have I don't know if you have any videos or stuff on YouTube, Vimeo that you use as promo stuff, love to post all of that. Just bring it and we'll put it out there.
Bring it. Okay.
Bring it.
Bring it on. Okay, Chris. Well, you now have a friend in South Florida.
I love it.
And a fan.
Okay.
So just let me know what I can do to help.
That sounds great.
And if you're ever down in Florida, let me know.
And same if you ever come back up to Memphis way, we'll hook you up with some barbecue in Graceland or something like that.
That sounds awesome. I've spoken a couple of times in Nashville, and I've done a lot of really good country dancing.
I bet you have. Look at you. I just so wish I could dance like that. That's great. All right.
It's a little intimidating at first, I have to say.
Have fun.
All right,
Thanks for your help.
Have a good night.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye.
You've just listened to I Share Hope. If you're ready to make a change, head to our website at isharehope.com and claim your free copy of the Top 10 Actions of Hope from World Leaders to use hope in your own life. Thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you next time.